comes Sabali. Clark.
Welcome back to Clark USA fans. Nobody saw it coming. Not on paper, not in the scouting reports, not in the endless pregame debates that tried to predict how this story would unfold. Every analysis, every prediction, every confident opinion was suddenly irrelevant the moment she stepped on the floor. Because from the very first whistle, Caitlin Clark didn't just play the game, she took control of it. The arena felt it immediately. The energy shifted in a way that cannot be measured on a scoreboard or explained through stats. Opponents sensed it first, then the crowd, then even the coaches on the sideline who had prepared for every possible scenario except this level of command so early in the game. New Zealand's defense reacted instantly, almost instinctively. Players began communicating louder, pointing, rotating early, trying to anticipate something they couldn't yet see. The bench leaned forward. The huddle broke faster than usual. There was urgency now, not confidence. Because the problem wasn't just that Caitlin Clark was on the court. The problem was how comfortable she looked there. She brought the ball up slowly, almost casually, like time didn't matter. No panic. No rush. No wasted movement. Just complete control. Every step felt intentional, every glance calculated. If you didn't know better, you would think she was easing into the game. But that would be a mistake. Her eyes never stopped moving. Left. Right. Corner. Weak side. Top of the key. She wasn't just seeing the court in front of her, she was seeing what it would become 2 or 3 seconds later. That's what separates elite players from everyone else. Not speed, not strength, but perception. Defenders came up to meet her quickly. 2 players almost immediately shaded toward her, forming a soft trap without fully committing. The message was clear: do not let her breathe. Do not let her dictate. But even that was already too late, because Clark had already seen the floor before they even stepped into position. A small shift of her body, a single dribble to the right, a subtle change in rhythm. And then it happened. No build-up, no hesitation, no warning. She launched a pass that cut across the entire court like a laser. A frozen rope traveling faster than the defense could react. The ball didn't float. It didn't arc slowly. It arrived like it had already decided where it was going before anyone else did. Corner. Perfect catch. Instant release. Swish. 7 seconds into the game. Just like that, the tone was set. The crowd erupted, not because it was just a three-pointer, but because of how effortless it looked. That wasn't a difficult possession. That wasn't a broken play being salvaged. That was a statement. Clean. Precise. Controlled. On the sideline, even the opposing coach stood up, not shouting, not panicking, but processing. Because experienced coaches recognize something very specific when they see it, a player who is already 2 steps ahead of the game. And Caitlin Clark was not reacting to New Zealand's defense. She was dictating it. She jogged back on defense as if nothing special had happened. No celebration. No emotion. Just calm transition, like she had already moved on to the next possession before anyone else had finished the last one. That was the moment the energy in the arena shifted permanently. You could feel it in the silence between reactions. That quiet realization spreading through fans, commentators, even opposing players. This wasn't going to be a normal game. This was going to be a problem. Because once a player establishes that level of control early, everything changes. Defensive schemes tighten. Decision-making speeds up. Mistakes multiply. Doubt spreads. And doubt is the most dangerous force in basketball. On the next possession, New Zealand tried to respond.
Leans in and banks it home. An astute and...
They adjusted their coverage slightly, shading more aggressively toward her side of the floor. They tried to force the ball out of her hands early to make someone else initiate the offense. But Clark doesn't just play within systems. She reads systems. She sees the structure behind the structure. She understands where the pressure is supposed to be and where it actually isn't. A half-second hesitation from her defender was all she needed. That is all it ever takes. She pulled up from deep. No extra dribble. No setup. No rhythm adjustment. Just rise. Release. The ball left her hands like it had been rehearsed 1,000 times in silence. It traveled high, clean, perfect rotation, no doubt in its flight. Nothing but net. Again. And now the reaction changed. Not excitement this time. Shock. Even players on Team USA's bench started laughing in disbelief. Not because it was funny, but because it looked unreal. Because shots like that are supposed to be difficult. Risky. Contested. Rare. For her, it looked routine. Like a warm-up shot. Like something she could repeat at any moment without consequence. The scoreboard barely had time to register what had just happened, and already she was walking back like it was just another possession in a long practice session. But the game itself was already different. Because New Zealand had started to understand something they didn't want to accept, they were not just defending a player. They were trying to defend anticipation itself. Every possession after that became heavier for them. More careful. More cautious. Players stopped trusting instinct and started overthinking. And in basketball, overthinking is the beginning of breakdown. Clark didn't need to force anything. She just needed to exist in space. And the defense would eventually collapse on its own. Because that's what she does best. She doesn't just score points. She creates doubt. And doubt spreads faster than any playbook can contain. On the perimeter again, she brought the ball up with that same calm pace. The defense gave her space this time, too much space. A subtle mistake born from fear. They were afraid of the drive, afraid of the pass, afraid of what happened the last time they reacted too late. But giving space to a shooter like her is not protection. It's invitation. She noticed immediately. No extra movement. No adjustment. Just recognition. And recognition is all she needs. She rose again. Deep three. Way beyond the line. The shot looked almost unfair in its simplicity. No struggle. No resistance. Just a smooth motion that ended with the ball snapping cleanly through the net. And now the arena wasn't just reacting. It was witnessing. Because at this point, it was no longer about runs or momentum shifts. It was about something much bigger, control of narrative. Every possession she touched became a highlight. Every defensive adjustment became a reaction to her previous move. The game was no longer two teams competing equally. It was one system responding to one mind. And that kind of imbalance changes everything. From that moment on, every defender on the floor started playing slightly faster than they wanted to. Every rotation felt rushed. Every closeout felt uncertain. Because they all knew the same truth. If she got even a fraction of space, it was already too late. And still, she remained calm. No frustration. No emotion. No visible effort. Just dominance in its quietest form. The game had become something else entirely now. Not a contest. A demonstration. And everyone inside the arena understood it.
The pace of this game, I'm not quite sure who has been.
3 players. 3 different tempos. 3 different ways of controlling a game, and all of them trying to exist in the same system at the same time. Chelsea Gray, a brilliant and proven winner, plays with patience and precision. She sees the floor like a veteran general, slowing the game down, dissecting defenses possession by possession. Then there is the chaos and speed element that Caitlin Clark naturally thrives in: fast reads, quick triggers, instant punishment for even the smallest defensive mistake. And surrounding them are other elite talents who all require touches, rhythm, and responsibility to feel effective. But that combination, as talented as it is, doesn't always equal harmony. Early in the tournament, it looked like a puzzle that hadn't been solved yet. The 5-in, 5-out substitution pattern disrupted continuity before it could even form. No lineup stayed together long enough to build chemistry. No guard duo had enough time to find rhythm. Possessions felt segmented, like pieces of different systems being forced to connect without glue. Even Caitlin Clark acknowledged it publicly in her own way, staying composed, respectful, and professional, but honest about the challenge of building flow when everything keeps changing every few minutes. You could see it on the court too, flashes of brilliance surrounded by moments of hesitation as talent tried to adjust to instability. And the frustrating part was obvious to anyone watching closely. This wasn't a lack of talent. It was a lack of continuity. Because when the most dynamic playmaker on the floor is constantly being rotated in and out of structure, the offense never truly becomes hers or anyone's. It becomes fragmented, reactive instead of fluid. Then everything shifted against New Zealand. For the first time, Caitlin Clark's name appeared in the starting lineup. Alongside Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, Monique Billings, and Dearica Hamby, the message was different now: stability, intent, a willingness to let chemistry actually develop instead of constantly resetting it. Even more importantly, the rotation philosophy changed as the game progressed. The rigid 5-in, 5-out system began to fade. Minutes were managed more naturally. Flow was prioritized over rotation patterns. And instantly, the difference was visible. When Paige Buchers entered alongside Clark later in the first quarter, the entire offense changed shape. The spacing improved. The ball movement accelerated. Cuts became sharper, cleaner, more decisive. There was suddenly room for creativity instead of congestion. And the combination fans had been waiting to see, Clark and Buchers sharing the floor, finally started to take form. It looked natural. It looked balanced. And most importantly, it looked dangerous. Because when players like that are allowed to play off instinct rather than restriction, the game stops looking structured and starts looking inevitable. From that point forward, the offense didn't just function, it flowed. Clark wasn't forced to overmanage everything. Gray could operate in her rhythm without clashing tempos. Shooters stayed ready instead of overthinking. And the overall energy shifted from uncertainty to confidence. Then came the third quarter. If the first half was a statement, the third quarter was domination. Caitlin Clark came out after halftime in a completely different gear. Anyone who watched her at Iowa would recognize it instantly, that shift where she stops pacing herself and starts taking over possession by possession. The ball didn't just move through her anymore. It belonged to her. Every possession ran through her decision-making. Every defensive reaction started with her movement. And every teammate on the floor understood it immediately. Stay ready, because the ball is coming. And when she is in that mode, hesitation disappears from the entire team. Players cut harder. Screens are set with more force. Off-ball movement becomes urgent instead of casual. Because everyone understands the same truth: if you do your job, she will find you. And she will find you at the exact right moment. The third quarter opened with a deep pull-up three, launched from well beyond the logo. A shot so quick and so effortless that the defender's contest didn't even matter. The crowd reacted before the ball dropped because they already knew where it was going. Swish. Next possession. Downhill attack. 2 defenders collapsed. The paint filled instantly. And without hesitation, Clark fired a pinpoint pass to a cutter along the baseline for an easy finish. That's the part people often miss. It's not just the scoring. It's the timing, the precision, the ability to release the ball exactly when the defense is most vulnerable, not before, not after, but at the perfect breaking point.
Trying to make something happen behind the back.
That's not coaching. That's instinct. And she has it at an elite level. Then came the moment that broke the rhythm of the entire arena. Clark crossed half court. The defense stepped up, anticipating movement. A drive. A pass. Anything predictable. She paused. Just for a fraction of a second. That was all it took. The defender shifted weight forward, expecting action. And Clark launched a shot from what looked like the parking lot. No setup. No warning. No hesitation. Just pure range. The ball floated high through the air, hanging for a moment that felt longer than it actually was. The entire arena went silent in collective anticipation. Then it dropped. Clean. Instant explosion. Even the commentators couldn't help but react with disbelief and laughter, because at a certain point, what else can you do? When a player is consistently stretching the limits of what looks reasonable, reaction turns into awe. And by that stage of the game, New Zealand wasn't just being outplayed physically. They were being outthought. Every adjustment they tried had already been anticipated. Double teams were met with instant reads. Tight coverage led to deep pull-ups. Soft coverage led to drives and kickouts. There was no correct answer because every option had already been studied in real time. It wasn't just execution anymore. It was control. Like playing chess against someone who already knows every possible variation of your next 5 moves and is improvising beyond that. By the end of the third quarter, the outcome was no longer in question. The scoreboard reflected it. The body language confirmed it. The energy in the building made it undeniable. But even then, Clark looked like she hadn't fully engaged her highest gear yet. And that's what made it even more unsettling for opponents. Because the version of her they were facing wasn't even the maximum version. Now, let's talk about the numbers, because they tell their own story, but not the full one. A strong all-around stat line. Efficient scoring. Playmaking impact. Defensive contributions. On paper, it looks like a complete performance. But paper doesn't show context. It doesn't show missed shots she normally never misses. Clean looks that came up short. Rhythm shots that just didn't fall. The kind of attempts that, on another night, turn a very good performance into something historic. That's the difference between great and legendary. A couple of made shots change everything. 2 or 3 possessions swing perception entirely. One sequence can shift the narrative from dominant win to all-time performance. And yet, even without those extra points, even without perfect shooting nights, she still controlled everything. Still dictated pace. Still created advantages everywhere she touched the ball. Still made the entire defense react to her presence instead of the other way around. Because that is the real measure of impact. Not just what shows up in the box score, but what breaks the opponent's structure. And by that measure, she was in complete control. Around her, teammates benefited from that gravity. Players like Ryan Howard found rhythm as the game opened up, finishing with strong contributions once the defense began collapsing toward Clark. Because that's what happens when one player bends the entire floor. Everyone else gets cleaner looks, easier reads, better timing. Not because the system changes, but because the defense can no longer hold its shape. And once that happens, the game is already decided.
Everything but the bucket that time for Phoenix.
What stood out in this game wasn't just the final score or the highlights that will circulate online. It was the structure around the performance itself and how every piece of it started to make sense once the rotation stabilized. Paige Buchers contributed 7 points on efficient shooting, including a solid 1 for 3 from beyond the arc, but her impact went beyond scoring. She provided spacing, decision-making, and another layer of ball handling that allowed the offense to breathe in key moments. Chelsea Gray added 5 points and 5 assists in just 15 minutes off the bench, a role many observers have argued she should have been in from the start of the tournament. In those limited minutes, her experience and composure brought calm to stretches that could have easily become disorganized. The one lingering question from the game, however, was Kalia Kappa's absence. She did not play a single minute, and there was no clear public explanation. Whether it was rest, injury management, or a tactical decision, it stood out sharply in a game where nearly every rotation choice felt intentional. And yet, even without her, Team USA's depth and control were undeniable. What made the result even more convincing was the fact that this level of dominance came without a fully settled rotation and without every key player even seeing the floor. It reinforced a simple but powerful truth. When this group is aligned, it becomes overwhelming. And when Caitlin Clark is operating as the primary initiator, the entire structure becomes significantly more dangerous. But perhaps the most important detail from the entire game is not something you can find in a traditional box score. It's minutes. Clark didn't play a full 40-minute workload. She wasn't grinding through every possession from start to finish. Instead, she played in controlled bursts, short, high-impact stretches where her presence alone shifted the direction of the game. From a coaching perspective, that is an entirely different level of value. Because when a player can enter the game, dictate tempo, generate offense, and completely alter defensive behavior in limited minutes, you are no longer talking about simple production. You are talking about leverage. That kind of player becomes a strategic weapon. Someone you can deploy at specific moments to change momentum instantly, while also preserving energy for the most important stages of a tournament. And the implications of that are massive. For opposing teams, it creates a constant problem. You don't just prepare for her, you prepare for when she enters, how long she stays, and what she changes the moment she touches the ball. Because the reality is simple, her production in 20-something minutes often rivals or exceeds what most elite players generate in full games. That is not just efficiency. That is impact compression, maximum influence in minimum time. And that leads to a deeper conversation that has followed Clark since her early career, the narrative surrounding her style of play. There is a persistent claim that she is primarily a three-point shooter, someone who relies heavily on deep range and volume scoring from beyond the arc. That narrative has been repeated so often that it has started to sound like fact to casual observers. But games like this continue to dismantle that idea. Because what actually unfolded against New Zealand was a much more complete offensive profile. In the fourth quarter, with the game already under control but still being played at a high level, Clark caught the ball in the mid-range area, absorbed contact from a closing defender, and finished through a foul with control and balance. That possession alone reflected something far beyond perimeter shooting. It showed touch, body control, and the ability to score under pressure in congested space. That is not a one-dimensional shooter type of play. That is a complete scorer's read. A player who understands spacing, timing, and physicality, and who can adapt to defensive pressure without losing efficiency. And when you zoom out beyond a single possession, the pattern becomes even clearer. During her 2024 rookie WNBA season, Clark averaged 19.2 points per game and hit 122 three-pointers, the second highest total in a single season in league history behind only Sabrina Ionescu. That statistic is often used to define her identity, but it doesn't tell the full story. Because inside those 19.2 points per game were layers of offensive variety, floaters in the lane, pull-up jumpers from the mid-range, transition finishes, and drives into contact against bigger defenders. The deep shooting was visible and memorable, but it was never her only tool. Even in her second season before injury limitations reduced her appearances in 2025, she was averaging 16.5 points and a league-leading 8.
From Clark, and Smith lays it home. So you have 2 assists and a bucket on the first.
8 assists per game. Analysts specifically highlighted the improvement in her mid-range efficiency and shot selection, noting that her scoring profile was expanding rather than narrowing. What we saw in this international game was simply the continuation of that evolution. 6 made field goals on 11 attempts. Only 2 of those were three-pointers. 4 came from inside the arc drives, pull-ups, and controlled finishes around the basket. A 55% shooting performance that reflected balance rather than dependence. That is not the profile of a player who only shoots threes. That is the profile of a player who reads defenses and chooses the correct level of attack. But even that statistical breakdown still misses the most important part of her impact. Because the real damage she caused in this game was not always recorded. It was invisible. It came in the form of hockey assists, defensive collapses, and chain reactions that started with her movement, but ended with someone else's points. There were possessions where she never appeared in the final stat line, yet her influence was the reason the play succeeded. A single drive that collapsed the entire defense. A kickout that triggered a swing pass. A rotation that created a wide-open corner 3-2 passes later. These are the kinds of actions that don't show up in basic box scores, but coaches and film rooms value more than almost anything else. Because they reveal control. Not just of the ball, but of the defense itself. One sequence in the fourth quarter captured this perfectly. Clark received the ball at the top of the key and executed a subtle fake drive to the right. That single movement was enough to shift all 5 defenders' attention and weight toward her direction. She hadn't even committed to an attack yet, but the defense reacted anyway. That is the power of reputation combined with decision-making speed. Then she delivered a bounce pass to Monique Billings on the short roll. Billings drew additional help from the weak side, which immediately created an open look for a teammate under the basket. No points. No assist recorded for Clark in the traditional sense. No official statistical credit. But the entire possession was built on her initial action. That is the part of her game that separates elite guards from transformative ones. Elite guards execute plays. Transformative guards create reactions. And those reactions reshape entire defensive structures. That is why the one-dimensional scorer narrative collapses under closer inspection. Because it ignores the architecture behind her game, the spacing manipulation, the timing control, and the ability to bend defenses without always touching the final play. She is not just a shooter. She is a system initiator. And as the game reached its closing stages, that became impossible to ignore. New Zealand tried everything. Tight coverage, switching schemes, double teams, early pressure. Every adjustment was met with an immediate counter. Every defensive idea was answered before it could fully form. It wasn't just that they were reacting late. It was that they were reacting to decisions already made. By the end of the game, the result was no longer in question. The scoreboard reflected the gap. The body language confirmed it. The pace of play sealed it. But the larger question remained unanswered. Not whether she could perform at this level. She already had. The real question was how high that level could go when the stakes increase, when rotations tighten, and when defenses are forced to commit even more resources to stopping her. Because if this is what she looks like in controlled minutes, then the ceiling is still ahead. And once a player reaches the point where even limited time changes everything, there is no simple way to contain that reality. There is no adjustment that fully solves it. And for opponents, that is the most difficult truth to accept. Because it means the problem is not temporary. It is structural. And it is still evolving.